Okay, good morning, everyone. Let's carry on with the Mahanama Sutta. It's taking a while. It might go a little bit faster today because the things that come up now are a bit more commonly talked about, and I think a bit kind of easier to relate to as well. So what we have looked at so far is how to kind of give rise to positive mental qualities through the recollection of the triple gem, Buddha Dhamma Sangha. And these can be, depending on the personality and the person, can be a bit tricky to actually achieve because it's hard to relate to these unknowns like the Buddha. What is a Buddha like? What is an Arahant like? What is the mind of an Arahant? These kind of things. It's a little bit sometimes alien and different, and so we need a bit of imagination and wise reflection to be able to relate to these things. But what we come to now is a bit more straightforward. The recollection of virtue, generosity, devatas, maybe not so straightforward, but it's certainly recollection of virtue and generosity. And these things are in many ways almost automatic. If you live a really good life, if you live a life of kindness, if you have metta and compassion to the majority of people that you meet on your way, then you tend to feel good about yourself. It just happens. Whether you want to or not, you're going to feel good about yourself. And so it's not so hard. We can aid that process a little bit by thinking about these things in the right way. And we can also aid the process of living with kindness by understanding the powerful effect it has on the mind. Then it actually becomes really important to live with good qualities and to be good-hearted and all of these kind of things. So there's a mutually reinforcing each other, these two sides, the meditation and then how we live our ordinary life outside of meditation. So let's see what the Buddha has to say about this. We're going to start with the Sila Nusati, the recollection of Sila, or ethical conduct, or morality, or good life, or whatever you want to call it. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so furthermore, a noble disciple recollects their ethical conduct, which is unbroken, impeccable, spotless, and unmarred, liberating, praised by sensible people, not mistaken, and leading to stillness, to samadhi. And then you have the standard paragraph that comes after that. So this is the kind of ethical conduct, the ideal kind of ethical conduct, the idea that it is unbroken, impeccable, spotless, and unmarred. So this all points towards ethics or morality, which is as perfect as it possibly can be. And the more stronger your morality is, the better it's going to be for the meditation practice. The more of these things fall into place. This is kind of why the ideal one is just to have metta and compassion pretty much all the time, or at worst kind of upekkha in your mind. And if you have these things, well then basically your ethical conduct is complete. It is unmarred, it's spotless, it is impeccable, it has all of these qualities. So this is putting the bar very, very high. And for most people, if you're not an Aryan, it is basically almost unachievable. Not quite unachievable, because if you have metta at all times, then, even a non-Aryan can achieve something close to perfection. But it is more difficult. And so we shouldn't put the bar so high that we feel bad about ourselves. Some people tend to feel bad about themselves. And I kind of, I don't usually have that feeling, so I'm not sure exactly how it works. So I'm getting a bit concerned about saying the wrong thing, so people kind of get the wrong end of the stick and they feel bad about themselves. So please don't make this into some sort of negative self-assessment. All of you, everyone who is here is a good person. Again, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So please know that about yourself. Have a sense of self-worth, self-value, self-esteem in this area, because that is your kind of rightful. You're the rightful heir to that through how you're living your life. So please don't take this the wrong way. What this means, rather, is just that we are trying to achieve even higher things, trying to go beyond, trying to reach something extraordinary. That's really what this is about. We're reaching for some very high fruits on that tree. These are no longer the low-hanging fruits, these are the high-hanging fruits that we're trying to reach. Yeah, and that's kind of, and those are the really interesting ones. Yeah, the low-hanging ones, okay, they are kind of all right, but the high-hanging fruits, wow, they are really interesting. Yeah, they are special. They taste the most delicious. You have to do all the hard work, climb up that tree. Yeah, and maybe eat some of the low-hanging ones on the way to kind of feed your way on the way up to the top, and eventually you get to the high-hanging fruits, the really delicious mangoes on that tree. Yay, finally, now I know what it is like. That's kind of the path here. So this is kind of the idea. Yeah, so you enjoy every stage, but you are kind of reaching for something very high here. So yeah, and so this is kind of, so we try to live this extraordinary, impeccable life, basically. Where does that come from? How can we do this? How can we have this ability to, generally say the right thing, do the right thing, and think the right thing? And of course, it comes from mindfulness. You stop, you're aware of what you're doing, and you allow the Dhamma to guide yourself. But how can we have that mindfulness? Because that mindfulness is very hard to achieve, right? We go through daily life, all things are happening. How it's easy to say, be mindful, actually it's quite difficult to do. So how can we be mindful? And the answer is right view. And right view in this context means understanding the danger of not being ethical, not being moral, understanding how you're setting back your practice. Understand that these are the real dangers in life. Last year when I was here in Sydney, I was kind of talking all the time about this idea of crossing the road. And when you come to a road, even if you are completely distracted, you will not just walk into a busy city street. You will always look left and right first. Why? But because you know it's dangerous. Even if you have zero mindfulness, well, not zero, 1%, mindfulness, you will look left and right because there's something inside of you, the self-preservation instinct, that will make you look left and right, regardless. And that self-preservation instinct should be much stronger when it comes to virtue than it comes to crossing that blooming road. Just a road, okay, you might die, big deal, okay. So you die, okay, so then you carry on anyway afterwards, unfortunately. So, that's not the end of the world. No, it's not the end of the world. It carries on. Nor is it the beginning of the world. The beginning of the world much worse than the end of the world, right? So Buddhists, we should say, that's not the beginning of the world. Or relax, it's not the beginning of the world. The end of the world in Buddhism is good. So when people say it's not the end of the world, as Buddhists, we get confused. What do you mean it's not the end of the world? That's a good thing, the end of the world. And so it's not the beginning of the world. Wow, is it not? That's okay, must be okay then, if it's not the beginning of the world. So anyway, the idea here is that this is what matters. In the long run, where you get reborn, in the long run, what really creates your happiness and avoids your suffering is not whether you die in that traffic accident. That's kind of a small stuff. The big stuff is actually how you live your life. That is where we should see the danger. And so every time you're about to speak and you can kind of feel that things aren't going quite right, okay, mindfulness should arise and tell you, this is dangerous. Here is a destructive force inside of me that destroys my own and other people's happiness for the long term. You're building up bad habits, building up these negative things. This is what really is destructive. This is what I mean by right view. And this is why the stream enter, that's why their conduct is so impeccable, because they understand this. Remember the simile we were talking about yesterday, like a child picking up a hot coal. Even if that child can't speak yet, it's just a toddler, they will let go of that hot coal straight away because they understand this is painful. In the same way, we have that mindfulness at all times. So this is how you can purify your sila to the highest degree. It takes that right view, though. Right view supports everything. Right view is behind all the aspects of this path. And so it is. you try to have this impeccable conduct without berating yourself if you fail. If you fail, have self-compassion, as someone said the other day, because it is inevitable that you will fail. You are conditioned to fail. You will make mistakes. And then have compassion for yourself, knowing that, yes, I am done something that will have a little bit of a negative effect. I'm taking one step back. Let me learn from this and carry on. And you will fail, and you will fail again. And sometimes you will keep on failing for a long time. And that's okay. Have compassion for yourself. Understand the limits of what you can do. And when you get all of these factors working together, it becomes a very powerful path forward. The last thing you want to do is to berate yourself or be upset with yourself for failing, because that very act of berating yourself closes off the possibility of insight into what is going on. Because this berating of oneself is like a negative bias towards oneself. And that negative bias, it skews your perception of what is going on. And when you have a skewed perception, you cannot see actually what is happening. You cannot see the causes and conditions that lead to that negative conduct or whatever it might be. Yeah? And because you can't see it, you can't adjust. But if you are neutral, if you have compassion for yourself, yeah, okay, I made a mistake, and that's fine. That is to be expected. Now, why did I make this mistake? And then when you look at it, you will see it becomes quite obvious, because I reacted to this person's silly conduct. Why did I react to this person's conduct? They don't know what they're doing. They're just another being in samsara. They are suffering. They may not look like that on the surface, but I know they are suffering. Everyone is suffering. They are deluded about what is the right thing to do. Why should I get upset by someone who's actually hurting themselves more than they're hurting me? I should have compassion for this person. And then you turn things around in this way. And then you're using the possibility of gaining insight into the situation instead of getting upset with yourself, which blocks that possibility of understanding what is going on here. And so, yeah, then we have all of these other aspects here of ethical conduct. It is liberating. Yeah, liberating here means your mind feels free when you live well. Your mind does not feel free. Your mind feels imprisoned by regret, by remorse, by darkness, by all of these things. If you don't live well, yeah. So it liberates you to be kind. It liberates you to be compassionate. Your mind is freeing up. Yeah. And this is a very important point. So if you can notice that, why on earth would you not be kind? Do you really want to be in prison? No one wants to be in prison. It's kind of one of the most obvious things. And so you liberate yourself. Praised by sensible people. Sensible people are the Vinyu, the wise people in the world. And so it's praised by sensible people. It's praised by the Buddha. The Buddha will say, well done, little Sydney meditator. Right? That's what the Buddha would say. And if the Buddha praises us, whose praise do we want in this world anyway? That's kind of the point. Don't worry about other people's praise. You become a prisoner of other people's stupid ideas if you wait for other people's praise. In fact, don't even worry about that, because that will lead you astray if you're waiting for that. It's like living in a mafia family, and the mafia family praises you for killing and stealing and extorting, yeah? And who cares if they praise you for those things? But the world is not quite that bad, but it's sometimes leaning a little bit in that direction, yeah? They praise you for superficial and silly things, not for the things that are really worthwhile. So praised by the wise, that's the praise we shouldn't even look for that praise, but that's the praise we should listen to if there ever is any praise. And so it's kind of nice, yeah. I know that when Ajahn Brahm said something nice to me, then I kind of listen, yeah, that I take on board. If someone else says something to me, nice or bad, I kind of tend to shrug my shoulders, whatever, it's not so important. But if Ajahn Brahm criticizes me, okay, then I usually will listen. But then again, he never criticizes me, so it's kind of nice. It's very easy with Ajahn Brahm. So then we have the idea of not mistaken, aparamatta, and I I think this translation, not mistaken, is actually a mistaken translation here. It doesn't mean not mistaken, it means not grasped, in my opinion. And I'm sure Bhante Siddhartha will have his reasons for writing it this way, but it means not grasped, just generally. Mistaken, I think the idea here is not grasped in the wrong way, kind of is the idea of mistaken here, I think, is what he means. Paramatta, paramasa means to grasp something or hold on to something. But the point here is that if you are, because we're talking about the stream enterer now, we're talking about the Aryas, they don't grasp onto the sila. Sila, patta, paramasa, that has been given up. This is one of the three lower fetters. And so they don't actually grasp their virtue anymore. Why? Because it's natural. They have become virtuous. They don't need to grasp it. So all of us, we should grasp it a little bit. So aparamatta is and this is where we have to be very careful, because sometimes I hear people say things, oh yeah, you know, the three lower fetters, not to grasp virtue and observances, not to have doubt, not to have sakkaya ditthi. And then they say, oh, if that's the case, I must practice like this, I must not grasp my virtue, otherwise I can't become a stream enterer. But that's the wrong way of thinking here. That's not how you become a stream enterer. The way you become a stream is by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. And the result of that is that you don't grasp virtue and observances anymore. This is not the practice, this is the result of the practice. The breaking of the fetters is what happens. But sometimes people get these things the wrong way around and they think that, oh, it must mean I shouldn't grasp onto sila and observances. But please grasp onto some sila and some observances. It's okay to bow down to the Buddha. That's like an observance. And your meditation, ideally, you should always reflect on it, but make it a little bit like an observance. Okay, I meditate every day at this time, at least for some time. Depending on, not everyone. That's not for everyone, but for those of you who do that, make kind of that determination. Okay, every day I will do meditation at this time or whatever. These kind of observances and sila are good, and we need to hold on to it a little bit. If you don't hold on to it a little bit, you're not going to do it. It's as simple as that. And so a little bit of holding on is okay. And so this is the result. So not grasp is my understanding of this word. And if I get a chance, I will have a discussion with Bhante Siddhartha, and he will dismiss my concerns, no doubt, but he will. And then the last one is not leading to samadhi, not leading to stillness, asamadhi sangvattanika. And so again, this idea that sila leads to samadhi, that we see again and again and again, all the way through the suttas, everywhere. Sila leads to samadhi, sila leads to sati, sila leads to all good things. It leads to, anything you would like, basically. The whole path is founded on sila. Sila is just so important on this path. And it is the foundation for samadhi itself. Okay. So then this is what you recall, and if you may not recall all of this, and you may not, if it isn't perfect yet, you will still recall a number of things. You will recall that you are trying your best. Remember that trying your best is worthy of a lot of respect already, because that actually is all we can do, is we try our best. And so the fact that you are committed to these things already is a wonderful thing. The extent to which you succeed, is also great. That's also kind of a very positive thing. And as I mentioned before, very often the sila is an automatic feeling good about yourself. You just feel good about yourself. You don't really have to do anything more. But you can also be more active in the way, a little bit active in the way that you remember this. Okay, I'm keeping the 5 precepts all the time. Sometimes on retreat, I keep the 8 precepts. I'm kind of, what does that mean? Well, it means that I'm giving fearlessness to other people and beings in this world. I don't kill anyone, I don't cheat anyone, I don't lie to people, all of these things. And that gives a sense of trust in the world, a sense of we can be at ease with each other. And that psychological ease is often very important for having a good life. If you are psychologically on edge or psychologically kind of not balanced or whatever, it's very painful. But if we can be at ease around each other, at least within the Buddhist community, that's already a great benefit. And so we should encourage all our Buddhist brothers and sisters to keep the 5 precepts. We should really, because this is such an important foundation for this whole path. And very often people who, in the West, who come from a Western context, who live in a Western situation, all of us here basically, we take sometimes the Dhamma much more seriously, because we come to this much more voluntarily than people who kind of just are enveloped by a Buddhist culture, where kind of things just happen in a sense. We take it much more seriously, and a lot of people in the West do keep the 5 precepts, and that's wonderful. People, here, whereas the people who kind of stay, who were born and grow up and stay within the Buddhist culture their whole life, they often forget about the value of these things. It's kind of very famously, Ajahn Chah asked, it was a large assembly of lay people. This is a story from Ajahn Brahm, so I hope it is reasonably true. Ajahn Brahm is famous for the dictum that never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So that's why I'm always a little bit skeptical about Ajahn Brahm's stories. But he says that, Ajahn Chah, there was this large gathering, maybe it was a Vesak day, I don't know what it was, and large gathering, and he asked the assembly of maybe 1,000 people how many keeps the 5 precepts, and there was 1 or 2 people who kind of raised their hands, and because they are Buddhists, they're grown up in Buddhist culture, they kind of, it's just par for the course, they don't think about it so much. But once you get outside of that Buddhist culture, you start thinking about it. It's not about whether you grew up in the Buddhist culture, that's kind of irrelevant, but the fact that you are outside of it, that makes you think about it in a different way. It makes you appreciate it more, the power of it, because you are outside. And so that means that a lot of people, like everyone here, keeps these precepts, and that's kind of a wonderful thing. Well, I hope you do anyway. I haven't asked you individually. The Buddhist Society of WA, we have over 1,000 members who keeps the 5 precepts at all times, and that's a kind of amazing and wonderful and beautiful thing. And we should rejoice in that. And remember, we create this fearlessness. We create safety in the world. We create trust in the world by keeping these things. They are very powerful things. So reflect on that. You are spreading out like a ripple in the pond. The stone drops in. The stone is you living well, and it ripples out to society around you. You do, or you just do an act of kindness towards somebody. Just spontaneous, you're just kind to someone, and it ripples out. And other people notice that, and they feel that. And they may not express it at the time, because maybe they don't have enough mindfulness to express it or whatever. But afterwards, it comes back to them, and they remember that. And then they take up some of that because they get encouraged to be kind, because they see kindness. Sometimes we have to see it in others to be able to build it up in ourselves. And then it spreads out, it ripples out. So it's very powerful. So remember these things. And as you remember that, you feel more joy that you are doing, you're living well, you're doing the right thing, you are on the path to something positive, path towards light, away from darkness. This is kind of the idea here. So that's why it leads to immersion, and then that's how you think about this and try to reflect on this. When you reflect on your virtue, don't make it into something very kind of elaborate, I mean, you can think about your virtue more elaborately. Let's say you're doing walking meditation, you kind of just think a bit about what you're doing. What is this? What am I doing here? And you kind of build up a perception of something that is nice and positive. But when you meditate, you don't want to reflect a lot. You just want to have that perception like ready, and just kind of gently bring it up into your mind to give you a little bit of boost. That is kind of the idea. And then you have the consequences of this. So when a noble disciple or a non-noble disciple recollects their ethical conduct, their mind is not full of desire, ill will, and confusion. This is called a noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They've entered the stream of the Dhamma and developed the recollection of ethics. Okay, so that is the ethical, the Sila Nusati. So now let us move on to the Chaga Nusati. Chaga, the generosity. And so it goes as follows. And as this is a very powerful way of developing kind of feeling good about yourself, because when you really do an act of kindness towards somebody, you give something, it's actually quite easy to feel uplifted about that. Yeah, I think the vast majority of people can do this, but train yourself in generosity to start to feel the positive effects of it. So furthermore, a noble disciple recollects their own generosity. I am so fortunate, so very fortunate. Among people full of the stain of stinginess, I live at home rid of stinginess, freely generous, open-handed, loving to let go, committed to charity, loving to give and to share. Yeah, so it starts off with this kind of rather interesting thing. I am so fortunate, so very fortunate. You are fortunate to be generous. Yeah, it is such an important thing to understand. This is a good fortune to have this. Sometimes people think, oh, I am the generous one and all these other people are stingy. That's really unfair. Yeah, that's kind of getting it really the wrong way around. You are the fortunate one if you are generous, because you will reap the benefit of that generosity. Yeah, so this is the right way of thinking. If other people are stingy, you should have compassion for them because they have no idea what they're missing out on. Yeah, wow, you're so stingy. I feel really sorry for you. I don't, don't say that to anyone. They will. It's dangerous, dangerous thing to do. But it is true, basically, because you have understood what is of real value in life. Yeah, what actually works, what does bring long-term benefits. And when you see some people in the world who are really stingy, there's something about them that is very unhealthy about that kind of character. There's a kind of a narrowness, a kind of, you are within your own little world. You're not reaching out to people around you. You're trapped like within yourself. This is me and mine, and stay away. And I'm going to build a fence to kind of look after my property. I'm going to live in a gated community, so no one with a guard in the front and a barbed wire on the wall around it. And this is where I'm going to live, and I'm going to be safe, so no one can take anything from me. And I'm going to build up my wealth inside this gated community, my gated little self. It's a painful way to live. You are cut off from the rest of humanity. You're cut off from other people. There's no connection there anymore when you live like that. Generosity is like a reaching out to others. It's like a feeling connected to people when you're generous. This is how we connect with each other. It's a beautiful way of connecting. And that kind of emotional connection is very important to kind of feel at ease. And in a sense, metta and karuna, when they are taken to the highest point, that is that emotional connection with the world. That's why if you really have metta and karuna, if you have that sense of friendliness or love and compassion, you never feel lonely. It's impossible to feel lonely, because that is connection, that feeling of having these things. And so, in fact, you feel even less lonely when you are by yourself, because you have metta. When you are with people, that metta might dip a little bit sometimes. It is in meditation we can achieve the highest metta, right? When you seclude yourself. When we're with people, it's more difficult. Not because people are bad, but because it's distracting or whatever. So this is kind of the thing here. So generosity is a powerful thing. It is the beginning of metta, the beginning of all of these things. And so please take this every opportunity you can to be generous and kind. It's such an important thing. And what is kind of extraordinary about the idea of generosity, and I say this very often, I will say it again now, but this is that the way that generosity is described, and actually this particular formula right here, it has a lot in common with the third noble truth, which is the noble truth of awakening, of finding a liberation from suffering. The two have a lot in common. And what is in common is, first of all, the word chaga. The word chaga is here literally used for chaga nusati, recollection of generosity or giving up, that chaga is found in the third noble truth. That's what you do when you become enlightened. You chaga, you let go, right? It's like similar to generosity. Then you have the word mutti. This here has also uses the word mutti in this formula right now. Mutti is one of the words used for the third noble truth. Then you have here you have vosaggarato, delighting in letting go. Vosagga is very closely related to the word patinissaga, which is found in the third noble truth. Again, very closely related. The last word you find in the third noble truth is analaya, which means like not roosting or not resting or anything. So there's 4 qualities found in the third noble truths. Of those 4, 3 are found pretty much in the formula for generosity. So generosity and awakening have a lot in common. And that's kind of really interesting here. And so when you are generous, it's really like a tiny, miny awakening right there. Why is that? And the reason is because when you are giving, you are letting go of yourself a little bit. Yeah, these are my things. And when you give something, you're letting go of yourself, of me and mine. And that is a small awakening, because awakening is the full letting go of the sense of self. Here you're doing a small letting go of the sense of self. The awakening is the full one. And that's why they have something in common. And this is one reason why generosity is kind of one of the important foundations on the spiritual path, because it leans in the same direction. It has a similar kind of effect. And also it makes you very happy and builds up this pamudra and gladness, which sets the whole thing in motion here, the meditation experience. And so generosity is very powerful. So take these opportunities, when you have them, wherever that opportunity kind of arises. And sometimes we forget these opportunities, and you need to bring it back again and again and again. So fortunate, to be rid of stinginess among people who are full of the stain of stinginess, freely generous. Mutta chaga. You just give. Sometimes you're afraid you're going to give too much, because you're concerned. You find that in the suttas, people who give too much, and the monks have to say no thanks sometimes, or not to kind of approach certain people because they are too generous. They won't be able to feed their families, and because they are giving away too much. Open-handed. Loving to let go. You really enjoy generosity. You really get off on the idea of giving, taking every opportunity. Committed to charity. Can't remember the Pali there. Anyway, loving to give and to share. So this is the idea of generosity. There's lots of suttas about generosity and how to do this in the right way, how to give, and what are one of my there's lots of really simple ones. One of the ones that I really like is where the Buddha says that if you understood the power of generosity, you wouldn't have a single meal without sharing it with someone. Really, really strong. Especially if you have something special. You have something that someone else does not have, then it's kind of great to share. So, or the one where he says that, after, like a monastic, after you wash your bowl, there will be some rice grains left in the bowl. When you pour those rice grains out, then think of it in a generous way. I give these to the little insects that live off these scraps. You're already making merit just by doing that. You're going to have to pour out those rice grains anyway. You might as well make it the intention to give it to those insects. The only difference there is whether you pour it out mindlessly or you pour it out with that intention. That already is a lot of good karma. Then there is the very nice story of King Pasenadi and the Buddha. And King Pasenadi goes to the Buddha and he asks the question, where should one give? And that's kind of a really interesting question. Where should one give? Because sometimes you have to make choices. Sometimes maybe you have to distinguish. How should we know when to give or where to give. And the answer of the Buddha is very interesting. Yeah, he doesn't say you should give to the Sangha or anything like that, or that's not what he says. And it would sound kind of strange if it did. It would sound a bit sort of self-centered or whatever. And his answer is you should give where you feel inspired, or where your heart is kind of confident. Yeah, pasada is the word in Pali. It means like inspired, confident, that sort of thing. Yeah. And that is really fascinating. Yeah. Then he says to King Pasenadi, he says that there are two different questions. One question is where is the most merit, and the other one is where you should give. And there's two different answers. In other words, you should not always just give where there is most merit. You shouldn't be this calculating machine with a spreadsheet maximizing your merit. Yeah. Because some people think of it like that. How can I maximize the merit? And actually it becomes cold. It becomes calculating. It loses the kind of point of generosity. Yeah, please don't give like that. And so that's why he says, give where your heart feels confidence, because when you feel confidence, when you feel compassion, when you feel inspired, when you are moved to give emotionally, that is when it has a powerful effect on your mind. Yeah, your mind kind of reacts to that. Your mind enjoys that. It makes a powerful imprint on your mind, yeah, because you do it with joy and happiness. And because it makes a powerful imprint, it's easy to remember later on. And this is the kind of giving we want to do, something that is easy to recall later on. So these are the powerful things. Not only that, but it will also encourage you to give again in the future. Because if you enjoy it, yeah, if you feel peaceful about it, if you feel good about it, it gives an encouragement to give more again in the future. So, yeah, give where you enjoy it. Whenever you feel an urging of the heart, yeah, you see a beggar on the street and you think, okay, today I feel compassion for this beggar. I'll give him or her $1 or $10 or whatever it is, or an apple or whatever it is that is available to you at the time. Why? Not because, don't worry about whether the person deserves it or not. It's very, very difficult to know. Probably they are just homeless because they have some mental health issue or something like that. That's very often the case. And so of course they deserve it. Yeah, if you have compassion, then they deserve it. That's enough. And so you give something, yeah, to support them. Why? Mostly because you feel compassion, you feel the urge to give. Such a joyous thing to give when you do it in the right way. Don't be too cynical about the world. Human beings are human beings. Everyone is suffering. Everyone has a problem. Everyone has difficulties. Sometimes it is obvious that people are begging for the wrong reasons. When you go to India and you see these kind of begging syndicates and the kind of, they really, then this actually reduces a bit of the joy of giving to people who are kind of professional beggars, and they kind of work for this hierarchy of this begging organization. That kind of destroys it a little bit. So you have a little bit of discernment, but don't be cynical about people, because that is so destructive. Yacha yoga. Okay, so yoga is like committed to, or yoga connected to, or yoked to yacha, which is giving here, right? Okay, good. Committed to charity. That makes sense. Okay, so then we have the same thing again. Yeah, when a noble disciple recollects their own generosity, the mind is not full of desire, ill will, and confusion. This is called the noble disciple, who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They've entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of generosity. So, so again, you can use this deliberately in your meditation. You can incline your mind towards something that you have done, some kind of act of kindness or generosity that you have done, and tune into that feeling that you had at the time. And by doing that, you can recreate some of that feeling from the past. Or it can be just a general sense that you are generous. There's different ways of doing this again, depending on how on the circumstances. Now we come to the last one, which is maybe again a little bit more difficult to relate to. This probably was easier to relate to at the time of the Buddha, because in those days the society was very much a society that believed in all sorts of deities and gods, and the fact that they interfere in human affairs, and they support you or they don't support, and all of these kind of things. Like most ancient societies that had a very strong sense of these deities. And to be honest, I think they were right. Yeah, they had good reasons for having that sense, because this is how the world operates, the way the world works. And it is really modern people who are missing out, who don't have any faith in this sort of thing. Yeah, to me, this actually makes good sense. Why would there not be devas in the world? You see little devas among human beings sometimes, and they will obviously be reborn in a good place, and they carry on the little deva activities in the deva realm afterwards. So let's see how this is done according to the sutta. Furthermore, a noble disciple recollects the deities. They are the gods of the 4 great kings, the gods of the 33, the gods of Yama, the joyful gods, the gods who love to create, the gods who control the creation of others, the gods of Brahma's host, and gods even higher than these. So these are the various kind of realms. So you have here the first 5 are the realms, or the first 6 are the realms of the sensual realm. And when you go to the gods of Brahma's host, you're going into the Rupa Loka, the gods that are equivalent to the jhana states and deep samadhi states. And even higher than these, well, it's just, going up the various realms of samadhi, basically, equivalent to that. Okay, when those deities passed away from here, they were reborn there because of their faith, ethics, learning, generosity, and wisdom. I too have the same kind of faith, ethics, learning, generosity, and wisdom. So the idea here is that you know that you are headed in the same direction. You're headed towards the same things as these glorious deities. And so what is it about these deities? Well, what it is about them is that they, it's almost as if they manifest those good qualities in the way they look. So you see them, they are kind of luminous, transparent, beautiful. They are also kind, they're also generous. Those qualities that they had as a human, they will carry with them into the Deva Loka. And so you see this extraordinary being who even looks after human beings. They are guardian angels, and they kind of look after the earth to some extent. There was an interesting YouTube video I watched recently by a fellow called Rupert Sheldrake, who is this kind of scientist in England who is very much into all kind of alternative science. But he's a very brilliant person in so many ways, and so it's actually interesting to listen to what he says. And he talks about, he's a Christian, but he's kind of a Christian in a kind of broad way. He lived in India for a while and all of these kind of things. And so but he has a lot of understanding of the Christian traditions. And one of the things he talks about there are the various kinds of angels. And I think the angels in the Christian tradition are basically the same thing as the devas in the Buddhist tradition or the Hindu tradition or whatever. And according to him, these angels, there's various kinds of angels, ordinary angels, archangels, and there's a guardian angels, and they all have different jobs and duties in the hierarchy of angels. And some of them look after individuals, some of them look after regions, some of them look after countries, some of them look after the whole planet. And this sounds a bit like the kind of the various levels of devas we talk about. And some of them look even after the whole galaxy, like the Brahmas of very, very high realms. They kind of have a mind which kind of goes over a very vast amount of, parts of the universe, basically. And so you can see how this it's interesting how different cultures have very similar ideas in these areas, right? I find that so fascinating. Because to me, very often, I think this is not just because ideas travel. There's some of that, of course, ideas travel from one place to another one, but it's also that these things are actually accessible. These things are the experience of people. These things have been seen by at least some people, and then it gets incorporated into that particular culture, And then other cultures have the same experiences. And so this is why we see this uniformity around the world in so many different places. Nagas, dragons are everywhere. These gods are everywhere. The way the gods behave are the same everywhere. Yeah, etc., etc., etc. And so ghosts are everywhere, right? All of these things are everywhere. And so these things actually exist. And then once you have this idea, if you can relate this, some of you may not be able to relate to this very well, but then you realize you are on that path as well. You're heading in the same direction. You have the same kind of qualities as these devas. And that's kind of nice, yeah, when you remember that. And that kind of lifts your spirits, makes you feel that you're on the right track, you're heading in the right direction. First of all to the Devaloka, and then ideally even beyond that, if you can. This is what this is about. So see if you can use any of these recollections to support your practice. Yeah, these are powerful things. This is kind of the purpose of many of the things that we do on the path, is to give rise to this sort of joy and happiness and rapture for meditation to work out. So see, try, and then if it doesn't work, then try to understand why. Can you do something different? Yeah, do you need to can you be even more generous in your life, and then come back and try again? Do you need to think about it in a different way, etc.? And then gradually you come to understand how this works. Okay, so let's just read it again, the paragraph on how this works. So when a noble disciple recollects the faith, ethics, learning, generosity, and wisdom of both themselves and the deities, their mind is not full of desire, ill will, and confusion. At that time, their mind is unswerving, based on the deities. A noble disciple whose mind is unswerving finds inspiration in the meaning and the teaching, finds joy connected with the teaching. When they're joyful, rapture springs up. When the mind is full of rapture, the body becomes tranquil. When the body is tranquil, you feel bliss. And when you're blissful, the mind becomes stilled in samadhi. This is called a noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are untroubled. They've entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of the deities. When a noble disciple has reached the fruit and understood the instructions, this is the kind of meditation they frequently practice. So that is the Mahanama Sutta. And I have kind of filed that under right view, because it is all about how to think about the world, how to reflect on the triple gem, how to think about the idea and the power of virtue and generosity. So a lot of this is very close to the definition of right view, as you find it in the suttas, where they talk about right view as there is the given, there is the sacrifice, there is the fruit and results of good and bad actions. There are awakened people in the world who have practiced well, and all of these kind of things. So it's very, very similar to that. Is one aspect of right view, and that's why I have kind of brought it out. But I want to now to kind of take it further. I'm not going to carry on much longer, just give you a little bit of a preview as to what is coming up. And I will take it much further, the idea of right view. This is just one aspect of right view that we have covered now. And I want to take right view into the more traditional ways of thinking of right view. I'm going to start by looking at things like just the ordinary simple things of life, like old age and death and these kind of things. I will have a look at that, because that is very important part of right view, and it's bleeding obvious that we're all going to die. It's not kind of, we can't choose these things, and because it is bleeding obvious, it's quite easy to understand. And even though it is easy to understand, we often don't integrate it fully in our lives. Actually, almost never do we integrate it fully in our lives. But there is a lot here. These are not the high-hanging, these are the medium-hanging fruits or low-hanging fruits right here. Or maybe they're fallen to the ground even, I'm not sure. These fruits are easily accessible, yeah? And so this is why this is very useful exercise, because it's easy to understand, but it has profound implications, and it can really change the way you think about yourself if you use these things differently. Sometimes you do the death contemplation, it really hits you powerfully. Of course, then you forget again. That's the kind of the danger with these things. And then when you forget, you start being stupid again. But so you need to do these things again and again and again. Yeah. When I say stupid, I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that in a kind of friendly way. Yeah. So this is just the way we are in a sense. One of the suttas, I'm not going to read it out because I think I made a mistake when I sent these suttas to you, Deepika, because I was supposed to have kind of made a selection. I thought some of these things I had chucked them out, but they're still here. I'm not sure what I did actually. I did something funny there. But so the next sutta here is called the Nibbana Sutta. And it's interesting because what this sutta says basically is that how we perceive, understanding the right kind of perception, that is the foundation for attaining Nibbana. If you want to find extinguishment, if you want to go all the way to awakening on the path, what you really need is to understand what perceptions should be cultivated and what should not. Yeah? And so this sutta says that if you understand that these perceptions lead to decline, yeah, that's what you need to understand. These perceptions lead to stability, you need to understand that. These perceptions lead to kind of improvement or moving forward on the path, you need to understand that. And these perceptions lead to profound insight, to understanding these things deeply, then you need to understand that. So all of these things need to be understood. First of all, you need to understand which perceptions are useful. Then you need to know the techniques for developing those. And then you need to succeed in the development of these perceptions. And then you are moving towards Nibbana. This sutta is really, it always caught my eye as quite interesting, that the path to extinguishment, to Nibbana, is termed completely in terms, is described completely in terms of perceptions and how to develop perceptions in the right way here. So it's kind of fascinating here. And then the next sutta after that is about what kind of perceptions are good and bad. And the basic idea is that our perceptions when we come into the world are dodgy. We arrive into this world with dodgy perceptions, biased, silly perceptions that are counter to the reality. This is why we get reborn. This is why we are here. We come into this world with avidya, lack of insight, lack of understanding. So that's why we are trapped. And this is why it is so important to recondition our perceptions to see the world more in line with how the Buddha saw it. And then we realign. And initially that realignment allows us to attain samadhi. And after samadhi, the full realignment happens when we gain the full insight as stream enters. But a lot of realignment needs to happen before that, before the full insight. So we are slowly approaching the vision of the Buddha, slowly approaching the way the Buddha thought about these things, gradually happening here. And so this is what this is about. And of course, the basic ideas, as you would know, the distortion of perception is that we see things as impermanent, as permanent, that actually are impermanent. We see things as self that actually are non-self. We see things as beautiful that actually not really all that beautiful at all. And we see things that are as happy when actually they are not really happy. They are problematic. They cause dukkha in the long run. And so what we want to do is you want to align our perception more with the way the Buddha saw things. Okay, these things are actually impermanent. He has a point. Of course they are impermanent. I'm going to die, for goodness sake. It is really I don't know when I'm going to die. Could I die today? Actually, I could die today. What does that mean? What does that mean for my life? How do I feel about that? Am I ready to die today? And if you're not ready to die today, you have a problem. You have to be ready to die today. The only time you can be ready to die is now. And so now is the time. And so you start to understand the idea of impermanence, through some very simple ideas. Sometimes we make these things too highfalutin. We make them too complicated. Yeah, I think sometimes we kind of watch the feelings in the body, kind of sensations changing all the time. That is one way of kind of watching impermanence. But sometimes, the things that are more down to earth, that we can relate to more, are more powerful, things like death. Yes, we can relate to feelings changing, but sometimes they don't have the same kind of impact because it's not as clear how that relates to the rest of our life. But death is very, very clear how it relates to our existence. And so we see the impermanent or the unreliable or the uncertain as unreliable and uncertain. We see non-self as non-self. We see dukkha as dukkha. We see what is not beautiful as not beautiful. And this is kind of what this whole process of recalibrating our perceptions is about. So this is what I want to talk about next up, but that is going to happen at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So please have a nice lunch, and we'll see you back in at 3 o'clock.